Didn't want to read it, receiving it from the Catholics. Mine couldn't conceive it, believing it from the Baptists. The Hebrews wasn't white, so they running all out of actors. Searching through the chapters and seeing they got it backwards. Kindly tell the truth and the rage in them only escalated. Every word they hated, but none want to debate it. So what I'm supposed to do? Let them fake it until they make it. Nah, bowing to the idols, my power's vowing to take them down. Non-believers smoking while Christians drinking the potion. Everybody's high on that lie when the demons spoken. Alive on the rival with Bruce, we all awoke with. Vision kinda blurry, he's realigning the focus. Gotta tell the truth and confuse the room or it clears it out. Fears don't wanna hear, so I'm filled with a lot of fears and doubts. You gave me the heart, so it's time to put the action in. Phrases that I give you on earth will only be practiced.
The truth is what you see, and there's no need to look further than the words written on stone. Find grace when you believe the body of the one without sin being hung on the cross, living the life that you should lead. Thankful every day that I live and bring tears, giving praise to the Most High. Giving praise to the Most High.
All right. Shabbat shalom. Let's get into it real quick. Make sure all right, so I edited the settings on Facebook, so it's not private. Shabbat shalom, Sister Allison Bronson. Thanks for the share. We're going to get into this topic real quick because of the necessity, how important it is. And not only that, we can't move forward with Shabbat Bible study messages about the Sabbath until we cover this topic. So I know there's a lot of people who follow the lunar calendar, so on and so forth. And you know what I'm saying, I might lose some friends on, you know what I'm saying, behind this message. It is what it is. That's usually what happens when, you know what I'm saying, you teach something that's kind of contentious or whatever. And that's not our practice. We don't practice contention over here. Normally this ministry is focused on our people who are still stuck in Christianity, who may be on the fence of whether or not they should keep the Most High's law, statutes, and commandments. You know what I'm saying? But this message in particular came about because you know, I went through my comments, which normally I don't really get that much attention on these Bible studies or whatever. But for some reason, when we taught on the true day of the Sabbath, so on and so forth, or the true Sabbath and why it was changed, you know, that collected a lot of views. I think it's about like 1,300 something views or whatever, but it had a lot of comments, right? And one of the comments in there was, do you keep the Saturday Sabbath or the lunar cycle Sabbath, so on and so forth. So, you know what I'm saying? I didn't answer it in the comments. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of people preaching and teaching in the comments. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. But we didn't do that. What we did was actually put this message together. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully we can gain some understanding. You know what I mean? Set some things straight, so on and so forth. But that's coming. That's coming. Let's go ahead and get into the devotional reading real quick. Let's go ahead and get Proverbs chapter 25. I meant 24. So sorry about that. And I can fix that real quick. Let me fix that. So if anybody comes in late, they won't get thrown off. It's Proverbs chapter 24. We're gonna read that for devotion. So we got that fixed. That's easy. So let's get into it real quick. All right. It says, do not envy evil men nor desire to be with them. Oh, hold on. Before I go into the reading, if my video and audio is good, someone please put a 1 in the comments. If my video and audio is good, let me put a 1 in the comments. I don't want to go through all that reading and then have to do it all over if something's the matter. I can't hear myself at the moment, but if everything is good, someone please put a 1 in the comments and we'll move on. All right, Sister Bronson said I'm good. Brother Chick says I'm good over in YouTube land. Shabbat shalom, Brother Chick. Good to see you, fam. All right, so let's get into it. All right, not trying to be contentious or anything, but it is. We'll deal with it after the devotion. It says in verse 1, do not envy evil men nor desire to be with them, for their heart plots to ravage and their lips talk of trouble. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. and by knowledge the rooms are filled with the precious and plant riches and pleasant riches. Salakia. Mighty is the wise in strength, and a man of knowledge strengthens power. Or by guidance you wage war, you wage your own battle, and deliverance is a great counselor. Wisdom is high for a fool, he does not open his mouth in the gate. He who plots to do evil is called a master of evil plots. The purpose of folly is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to men. If you falter in the day of distress, your strength is small. Deliver those taken to death, and hold back those stumbling to the kill. If you say, see, we do not know this, would not he who weighs the heart discern it? He who watches over your life, would he not know it? And shall he not repay man according to his work? My son, eat honey, for it is good, and the honeycomb sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is thus to your being. If you have found it, there is a future, and your expectancy is not cut off. Do not lie in wait, O wrong one, against the dwelling of the righteous. Do not ravage his resting place. For 7 times a righteous man falls and rises, but the wrong one stumbles into evil. Do not exult when your enemy falls, and let not your heart rejoice when he stumbles, lest Yahweh see and it be evil in his eyes, and he turn away his wrath from him. But do not fret because of evildoers, and do not envy the wrong, for there is no future for the evildoer. The lamp of the wrongdoers is put out. My son, fear Yahweh and the king. Do not mingle with those who change, for their calamity arises suddenly, and who knows the ruin of both of them. All right, in verse 23, there also are of the wise. It is not good to show partiality in judgment or right ruling. He who says to the wrong, you are righteous, peoples curse him, nations despise him. But those who rebuke the wrong, it is pleasant, and a good blessing comes on them. He who gives a right answer kisses the lips. Prepare your outside work, and make it fit for yourselves in the field. Then you should build your house. Do not witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Do not say, let me do to him as he did to me. I repay each according to his work. I passed by the field of the lazy, and the vineyard of the man lacking heart, and see, it was all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I set my heart on it. I looked and received discipline. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty shall come, a prowler, and your need like an armed man. All right. So the Most High's word is already blessed. All right. Shabbat Shalom, Brother Emmanuel Bronson. All right. We're going to go ahead and get into it. Instead. And let me check, make sure everything is everything. All right. So do you keep the Saturday Sabbath or the Lunar Sabbath? The fact that we're even here, you know what I'm saying, should answer that question to those in the comments asking, do we keep the Shabbat, you know what I'm saying, on the weekly Sabbath? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we're going to get into exactly why, you know what I'm saying? And then too, we got to bring out the discrepancies in the lunar calendar. And there's a lot of people I know who follow that, and they call us fools for, you know what I'm saying, following the weekly Sabbath, given that it had transformed from, you know what I'm saying, what it was to the Gregorian calendar, this, that, and the third. So there's a couple of things that we're on the defense about, and we have to prove, right? One of the questions would be, when they changed the calendars, so on and so forth, did the days of the week change, right? We have to consider the Roman 8-day calendar, right? And how that played into the whole situation. So, you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of things that we have to uncover, you know what I'm saying, and hopefully, you know what I'm saying, we can move forward with our regular, the Sabbath teachings that I have planned. You know what I'm saying, we can just move on smoothly with that, but we have to bring out this information for those in the back. All right. No, I'm still on the screen twice. Hold on, let me do something. Let me do something about that real quick. All right. Get him out of here. All right, so let's get into it real quick. All right, so do you keep the Saturday Sabbath or the lunar cycle Sabbath? What's to that? All right, which Sabbath do you follow? Weekly Saturday or the lunar based? All right, So first thing, we have to establish why it's important to the Most High. All right. It's, you know what I'm saying? There's 5 important points that we got to bring out. One is why it's important to know when the Sabbath day actually is. Okay. Exodus chapter 31, 12 to 15. We'll get there. Number 2, the Most High says the biblical week should be counted, right? He gives us a standard biblical week, all right, and that we follow. 6 days shall work be done, and that 7th day is a day of rest. Number 3, biblical references to show whether the Bible makes any reference to what is known as transitional days. Now, when we get to speaking about transitional days, that throws off that natural 6-day work, 1-day rest cycle, all right? And it's not really, you know what I'm saying, the going into the Gregorian calendar that throws people off. It's actually when you try to count those transitional days as days. They say that they don't count. But well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It is what it is. Number 4, we got to bring out historical documentation to show whether the days were somehow off by the introduction of the Gregorian calendar or not, right? And number 5, we have to bring out other relevant sources to make it plain and or clear. So, you know what I'm saying? Hopefully this message does that. All right, so let's deal with the first part, all right? Why it's important to know when the Sabbath day actually is. Exodus chapter 31, verses 12 through 15 is going to let us know. It says in verse 12, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, and you speak to the children of Israel, saying, my Sabbaths you are to guard by all means, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I, Yahweh, am setting you apart. All right. So this is just a note to the folks who don't believe that we have to keep the Sabbath day. We could no way possible know that if today is the actual Sabbath day that, you know what I'm saying, that they were keeping in the Bible. Right. So that's the rationality that some people have. Then you have those who are in the Sunday church who believe that the Sabbath changed from Saturday to what they call Sunday. Right. And then there's people who have you know what I'm saying, have a disdain about it because it's called Saturday, right? Knowing that it's taken from the Roman god Saturn. We get that. But just because the name is changed doesn't mean that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days have changed. Let's get it. Right? Verse 14, it says, and you shall guard the Sabbath, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. But anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from amongst his people. Right? 6 days work is done. And on the 7th is a Sabbath of rest, set apart to Yahweh. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath day shall certainly be put to death. Right? So that's why it's important to know when the Sabbath actually is. Right? And then it's also a side note to those who didn't know how important the Sabbath day was to the Most High. Right? Whether they believe they can keep it or not, or do them, you know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Let's keep it moving. All right. In verse 16, it says, and the children of Israel shall guard the Sabbath to perform the Sabbath throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. Right? What this tells us right here is that, you know what I'm saying, when people try to say the laws are done away with and say that we don't have to honor the Sabbath day, this scripture is speaking contrary. All right. He says we are to perform the Sabbath throughout our generations as an everlasting covenant that doesn't end. Right. Verse 17, between me and the children of Israel, it is a sign forever. For in 6 days, Yahweh made the heavens and the earth. And on the 7th day, he rested and was refreshed. Right. So not only are we given the command to keep the Sabbath day, right here, the Most High has established the 7-day cycle. Right? It's important. Keep that in your notes. The Most High established the 7-day cycle. So when you bring out something that breaks up the 7-day cycle, you are now off biblically. Right? And I'm sorry to my lunar calendar keepers, but that's what the transitional week does. It is what it is. Number 2, how the Most High says the biblical week should be counted. We just read that, right? He says in verse 15, the 6 days work is done, and on the 7th is a Sabbath of rest, set apart to Yahweh. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath day shall certainly be put to death. All right, so we have 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, then repeat equals 7 days. That's what we've always known. And then that's also a nonsensical argument. We're not going to get into it, but anyways, let's get it. It's now it's problematic when those who follow the lunar calendar says that there are 2 to 3 transitional days, right? So we have to get into what the transitional days are, right? How transitional days work, right? You have what they call the new moon day, right? The new month begins with the new moon day. which is a separate day of observance, and it's not considered one of the regular weekdays, right? Then after that, the second, what they would call the new moon day would not count as an actual day, but the actual second day would be their first day. So when they get to the 8th day, they would have their first Sabbath, right? It is what it is. It says the Sabbaths in the lunar calendar are observed on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th days of the lunar month. These Sabbaths are always 7 days apart, but the cycle resets with the new moon, right? It's problematic. Transitional days at the end of a lunar month, after the 29th day, the 4th Sabbath, there can be 1 or 2 additional days before the next new moon. These days are transitional days and are not counted as part of the traditional 7-day weekly cycle, right? So what did the Most High say in Exodus chapter 31? 6 days shall work be done, and that 7th day is a day of rest. The Most High set the 7-day cycle. Now, when you introduce in transitional days, you are breaking up what the Most High said. Thus, you have to understand that lunar calendar Sabbath keeping is a man-made doctrine. It is what it is. But we won't rest there. Here's an example scenario. Day 1, the new moon. It's not part of the weekly cycle, right? Days 2 through 7, those are regular days. That'll be the first week. Day 8 will be the first Sabbath. Days 9 through 14, regular days, that's second week. Day 15 would be the second Sabbath. Days 16 through 21, regular days. So y'all get it. So when we get all the way down to the 29th day, that's the 4th Sabbath, right? Now, if the lunar month has 30 days, all right, day 30 is what they would call a transitional day, all right? In this example, the next new moon will begin the new month. So we have to bring it out and show how that's problematic. All right. These transitional days mean that the traditional 7-day week can be extended by 1 or 2 days at the end of the lunar month, right? The new moon day and any additional transitional days effectively reset the cycle, allowing for a smooth transition into a new lunar month, right? That's how they rationalize it, and it makes sense to them. That conviction holds them. It is what it is. This system ensures that the Sabbath remains aligned with the lunar phases, even though it means the weekly cycle does not continuously follow the traditional 7-day pattern, which the Most High established. It's important to bring that out, right? So, example. All right, if it came in on a Saturday, right? Let's look at the calendar. Matter of fact, let me get my pointer real quick for those who are. Let's get the laser pointer out here. All right, so let's just say the new moon came in, all right, on a regular Sabbath day. All right, so that day doesn't really count as a day. The first day of the week would. That would be the second day. So we get down to the 8th day. That's the first Sabbath, the second Sabbath, the third Sabbath, the fourth Sabbath, and then you have these 2 transitional days. Now, since the day came in on a Sabbath day, when would the next month come in? When would the next month start? Right? The next month would obviously start on a Wednesday, right? So you went from having the first day on on the Sabbath, on then you have 2 transitional days instead of the new month starting, on at the end of the Sabbath, how they would normally have to keep it. No, they don't do that. It's 2 transitional days, which throws everything off. So let's get it. Let's keep it moving. I have to take them off. Let's keep it moving. All right, the Most High gave us 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. So if we can prove in the scriptures, right, where the Sabbath day lands on any day other than the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, then we can safely say that the lunar Sabbath is a man-made doctrine, right? They said it has to happen. The Sabbath has to be on what they would call, the 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th, right? So we have to prove if the scriptures line up with that, right? Does the scriptures. So let's get 1 Samuel chapter 20 real quick. Let's get 1 Samuel chapter 20. Starting at verse 5, it says, and David said to Jonathan, see, tomorrow is the what? New moon. And I ought to sit with the king to eat. But let me go, and I shall hide in the field until the 3rd day at evening. Right? So let's get this. Verse 18. So Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon, and you shall be missed, because your seat shall be empty. Right? And on the 3rd day, go down quickly, and you shall come to the place where you hid on the day of the dead, right? Of the deed, Salakia. And shall remain by the stone Esther, right? Verse 24 says, and David hid in the field, and when the new moon came, right, the king sat down by the food to eat, and the king sat down on his seat as at other times on the seat by the wall, Salakia, with Jonathan standing and Abner sitting by Shaul's side. But the place of David was empty. But Shaul spoke not a word that day, and he thought, it is an accident, or he is not clean, for he has not been, for he has not been cleansed. He thought David wasn't there because, he was unclean. Verse 27. And it came to be on the next day, the second day of the new moon, right? Or the second day of the month, David's place was empty. And Shaul said to Jonathan, his son, why has the son of Yashai not come to eat, right? Either yesterday or today, right? So understand, this proves that this is the second day of the month, but according to the lunar calendar, it's supposed to be the first day of the month, right? That's the first problem. All right. Verse 34. And Jonathan rose from the table in the heat of displeasure and ate no food, all right, the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father put him to shame. And it came to be in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a small youth was with him. Right. And Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of Yahweh, saying, Yahweh be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he rose and departed. And Jonathan went into the city, i.e. David left. All right. So now let's pick it up in 1 Samuel chapter 21. Right. In the first verse, he says, then David came to Nob, Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech was, Salakia, let me read that over. He came to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. And Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, why art thou come alone, and no man with thee? Right. And David said unto Ahimelech, the priest, the king has commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee. All right. The thing was, nobody sent David. David, was on the run. All right. And I have appointed my servant such and such a place. Right. Now, 1 Samuel chapter 21 verse 3 says, now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, and what there is present. Right. And the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under my hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. All right. So what is the point that we're bringing out here? All right. It was the third day when David left. Right. Third day of the month when David left. All right. So if he's meeting the priest Ahimelech and he's asking for the showbread, what that tells us what day it is. Right, because the priests have to change out the old showbread with the new showbread on the Sabbath day. So this is telling us 3 days after the new month, right, was a Sabbath day. Now, according to the lunar calendar keepers, it would have to be 8 days, right? The Bible does not line up with that. That's pretty much all we're bringing out here. Verse 5, it says, and David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out. Right, since he came out of hiding. And the vessels of the young men are set apart, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. Right, telling us that he's talking to priest Ahimelech on a Sabbath day. Verse 6, it says, so the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken before Yahweh, to put hot bread in the day when he was taken away. Now remember, this is the third day of the month when this happened. What day did the priest have to replace the showbread according to the law or according to Torah? Right? We get that in Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 5. It says, and thou shalt take fine flour and break 12 loaves of cake there, 12 cakes thereof. 2 tenths deals shall be in one cake. Verse 6. And thou shalt set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, upon the pure table before Yahweh. And thou shalt put pure frankincense upon each roll, that it may be on the bread for a memorial, even an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. Every Sabbath he shall set it in order before Yahweh continually. That's the point. Every Sabbath. This is the Sabbath day when David is talking to priest Ahimelech, 3 days after the new month. Right. That kills that whole that cycle. The priest had to replace the showbread every Sabbath day, which means this all took place on the Sabbath day, which is also the third day of the month, not the 8th, 15th, the 22nd, or the 29th, which means the lunar Sabbath doctrine is not biblically sound doctrine. That's man-made doctrine, right? And then not only that, to prove that was on the Sabbath day, that's the same thing that Christ used to cut the Pharisees, right? Matthew chapter 12 and verse 4, right? It says, at that time, Yahushua went through the grain fields on the Sabbath day, right? He says, and his taught ones were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain to eat, right? And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, look, your taught ones are doing what is not right to do on the Sabbath, right? And he says, but he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him? All right. How he went into the house of Elohim and ate the showbread, which was not right for him to eat. All right. This is the whole reference of where we was at in 1 Samuel 21. All right. He's using this just to show you that this all took place on the Sabbath day. All right. So to triple down on the precept, let's get it. Numbers chapter 10, looking at verses 11 and 12. It says, and it came to be on the 20th day of the second month, right? In the second year, that the cloud was taken up from above the dwelling place of the witness. And the children of Israel departed, setting out in the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud dwelt on the wilderness of Paran. Right. Now jump down to verse 33. It says, so they set out from the mountain of Yahweh on a journey of 3 days. And the ark of the covenant of Yahweh went before them 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place. All right. So understand, the first day of the journey would have been the 20th, the second day, the 21st, the third day, the 22nd. So according to the lunar Sabbath calendar, this would be a Sabbath, right? But they had to work. That's basically the whole point. We ain't really got to stay there. They would have had to work. So anyways, let's get back to it. Did the moon exist during the first 3 days of creation, right? Let's get Genesis chapter 1, look at verses 16 and 19 real quick. And hopefully I'm not going too fast, but it is what it is. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to move. Verse 16, it says, and Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made also the stars, right? And verse 19, and the evening and the morning were the what? 4th day, right? So that means on the first day there was no moon, the second, the third, okay, then the 4th day the moon was created. The second day, you know what I'm saying, of the moon is day 5. The third day of the moon would be day 6, and the 4th day of the moon, all right, which is day 7, which the Most High created the Sabbath day, right? The Most High created the Sabbath day on the 7th day. The moon was created on the 4th day. So that whole lunar calendar falls apart even in the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, because they created, they have their new moon, all right, and then on that 8th of that day or that week, 7 days, you know what I'm saying, is their Sabbath day, their weekly Sabbath. But the Most High created the Sabbath day on the 7th day and the moon on the 4th. The math doesn't add up, right? So let's look at another claim made by the so-called lunar Sabbath keepers. I ain't gonna say so-called, it is what it is. All right, they like to use Ezekiel chapter 46 to make a point. It is what it is. We'll look at it real quick. All right, starting at verse 1, it says, thus said Yahweh Elohim, the gate of the inner court that looketh towards the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open, right? So they cleave to this verse to try to prove, you know what I'm saying, the lunar calendar. They make the claim that this verse says that the new moon is its own separate day, but the Bible says that nowhere, right? The Bible doesn't corroborate that. Or there are 2 different types of Sabbaths translated in the Bible. And a lot of people don't really know that. When they just open the scriptures and read it, you know what I'm saying? They assume when it says the Sabbath, it's all meaning the exact same thing. But in the Hebrew, there's 2 different Sabbaths. You have the weekly Sabbath and you have the yearly Sabbath. The weekly Sabbath is what's known as Shabbat in Hebrew, all right? And then the yearly Sabbath is what's known as Shabbathwan, all right? Or simply Shabbathwan, right? If we take the latter half of that Shabbathwan. And we know the Hebrew is read from right to left, so on and so forth. So this Hebrew word would be Shabbat Wan. It is a different type of Sabbath. All right. This term is used to refer to the high Sabbaths or special holy days that occur annually in the Hebrew calendar, such as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the first and the last day of major festivals like, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? I know I have Passover up there, but we know the difference between the two, right? So in both cases, they are translated into English as Sabbath. That's what people miss. They don't know that there's a Shabbat and there's a Shabbat Wan, right? The weekly Sabbath, is the Shabbat, right? And on that day, there's no cooking, no kindling fire, no gathering sticks, no carrying burdens, no manner of work allowed, so on and so forth. And that's one of the Sabbath lessons that I wanted to get into, but we had to come here first and deal with the whole lunar calendar situation. It is what it is. So on the yearly Sabbath, the Shabbat Wan, all right, we have cooking allowed. We have kindling fires allowed, gathering sticks allowed, carrying burdens allowed, and certain work allowed. A lot of people really don't know that because when they're reading it, they're not going into the Hebrew lexicon to find out the origin of the word. Is it the weekly Sabbath that's being addressed here or the yearly Sabbath? If it's concerning a feast day, it would be a yearly Sabbath, right? It is what it is. And then we made easy work of this when we were bringing out how, the day that Christ died and was resurrected, when we was killing that whole Good Friday doctrine. It is what it is. And but that's one thing to be careful of and to do the research on when the scriptures is talking about the Sabbath day. So when you go into I ain't gonna over talk it. We'll get there. Exodus chapter 3, 35 verse 3. It says, "Ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day." All right. This Sabbath is from the Hebrew word Shabbat, right? We just established how you're not allowed to do any work, so on and so forth, right? Now let's look at Exodus chapter 12. Look at verses 3 through 3, 6, 8, and 10. All right. It says, "Speak to the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of the month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house." Right. In verse 6, it says, "And ye shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, and it shall eat the flesh in that night, roasted with fire, and the unleavened bread, all right, with the bitter herbs. They shall eat it." Verse 10, "And ye shall know, and ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth until the morning ye shall burn it with fire," right? So they're being told to burn it on the Sabbath. Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right, we understand that. All right, let's get it. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, ye shall have gathered in the fruit of the land. Ye shall keep a feast unto Yahweh 7 days, and on the first day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. Right? So understand, when you get the Hebrew lexicon and you look up the Hebrew word H7677, it is talking about Shabbat Wan. That's not talking about a regular Shabbat or a weekly Shabbat. It's talking about a yearly Shabbat. We can do all of this on the Sabbath because it was a Shabbat Wan. We understand the difference. Okay, let's keep it moving. Right. And then they love to use Amos chapter 8 and verse 5. But understanding the two differences between Shabbat and Shabbat Wan, we can, understand the scriptures better. In verse 5, it says, saying, "When will the new moon be gone, right? That we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekels great, and falsifying the balances by deceit," right? They say this verse proves the lunar Sabbath because they both are mentioned together, right? But the new moon in this verse is a specific new moon, right? The new moon days are all Shabbat Wan days except for the one in question. This one right here, right? This new moon is the day of the Feast of Trumpets, right? Out of all of the feast days that are Sabbath days, that are yearly Sabbath Wan days, right? The Feast of Trumpets is the only new moon day that is not, right? You have to be able to make that distinction. Leviticus chapter 23 verses 24 and 25 says, speak ye to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a set apart convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. Right? The point being is that the only new moon in the Bible where there is a restriction on work would be the new moon. All right. Talked about in Amos chapter 8 and 5 for the feast of the blowing of the trumpets. Right. That's how you make the connection, precept upon precept. Amos chapter 8 and 5 is answered by Leviticus 23 and 24. Right. Chapter 23 verses 24 and 25. It is what it is. Let's keep it moving. All right. Lunar Sabbath flaw. There's a problem. We have a problem. The weekly Sabbath fell on the 3rd day of the month that we read, right? So, you know what I'm saying, the 22nd would not have been a Sabbath. We read that we get that in Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, 12, and 33. Okay. And the transitional days are not in the Bible. We know that. Right. So people make the argument, there's no such thing as a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. None of those days are mentioned in the Bible, of course. But we do know that the Most High, counted the days 1 through 6. Then the 7th day he named the Shabbat, correct? We understand that, right? So, matter of fact, I really don't even want to get into that argument because that's nonsensical. Right. But we still will bring out the point to prove that the weekly Sabbath is Friday sundown and Saturday sundown. You still have to make that point. Right. People are tripped up by the names of the week. The Most High never named any of the days of the week except for the Sabbath. However, that is not a good reason to go against the 6 days of work and the 1 day of rest established by the Most High. Right. There are many languages outside of English that don't use Saturday when describing the 7th day of the week, such as Spanish. They got Sábado. Portuguese, that's still speaking Spanish, that's Sábado. No, Portuguese and Spanish is not the same. You know what I'm saying? My bad. They sound the same. All right. You got the Italian. They say instead of Saturday, Sabbato. The Russians, it's the same thing, Sabbato. The Polish, Sabbato, so on and so forth. All of these names incorporate the concept of the Sabbath, highlighting its influence on the naming of the 7th day of the week in these cultures. All right. Here's what it is. Babylonian captivity. A lot of people make the claim that, we got that sundown, sun up worship, and our Sabbath day from being in bondage to the Babylonians, because it is what it is. Right. Since solar Sabbath keepers like to say that Friday sundown to Saturday sundown was introduced by Babylonian captivity, since that's a historical claim, we have to prove historically that that's not the truth, right? And then without the proof, if someone says that randomly out loud, it sounds good, sounds believable, and a lot of people are convicted by that, but they don't do any actual research. So since it was a historical claim made, we have to go back into historical information and find the truth. So let's get the new Sheffield Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge. All right, this is volume 10 on page 135. It says, it is now held by many that the Sabbath is Babylonian in origin. Consequently, the Babylonian Sabbath was a day of penance in the middle of the Babylonian month. It has also been held that the 7th, the 14th, and the 28th days of the month, designated as ill-omened, were the Babylonian Sabbaths. Right? That's not the biblical Sabbath. But for this argument, there is no evidence, and it must accordingly be assumed that the 15th day of each month was the Sabbath of the Babylonians. This day was reckoned that of the full moon, but since the Hebrew Sabbath was not connected with the full moon and was a day of gladness, not of penance, all right, and since the Babylonians had no week of the 7 days, all right, the assumption that the Hebrews borrowed the Sabbath from the Babylonian lacks all foundation, right? It just doesn't hold up. It is what it is. All right. So, and then too, if you make the claim that that they started keeping it, they borrowed from the Babylonians, right? You're saying the same thing. You're saying that Christ kept the Babylonian Sabbath. It's just ridiculous, but it is what it is. If the Babylonians claim is true, then you must ask this question: why did Christ keep it on the same day? All right. And the same time as other Jews when he came on the scene, right? Luke chapter 4 and verse 16, it says, he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. Right? You have to say that same thing about Christ. Now let's deal with the Roman 8-day calendar, because they say, the Romans had an 8-day calendar. So that would throw us all off. It wouldn't, the math wouldn't work, right? So let's just deal with it. Because even though that's true, you have to understand it's broken down a certain way. Although the Romans had an 8-day week calendar, they also had a 7-day week calendar at the same time. Ooh, so how did that work? All right. In order to understand that, we have to get this book called Sunday in Roman Paganism by Robert Lee Odom. Right. And this is what it says. Sunday in Roman Paganism by Robert Lee Odom. All right. It says planetary week in the 1st century BC, page 77. All right. Let's scroll down to where it says the Sabine calendar. In 1795 were found the marble fragments of what is known as the Sabine calendar, right? In a place in central Italy. Can't even talk. These portions represent the months of September and October in the Julian calendar. The experts in this type of archaeological finds have declared them to belong to the origin of Augustus Caesar, and that they were in use between 19 BC and 4 AD. That is between the years 75, so on and so forth. All right, so the point being right here is if this calendar was in use, all right, then that was before Christ was born, right? Just to make that small point. All right. Point being, the Sabine calendar was before the birth of Yahushua, which means that when Christ came on the scene, this calendar was in use. All right, let's get it. Let's get some more. The book titled The Works of Josephus, all right, and it's called Against Apion, book 2, page 811, section 40, subsection 282. All right. It says, nay, further, the multitude of mankind itself have held a great inclination of a long time to follow our religious observances. For there is not any city of the Grecians, nor any of the barbarians, nor any nation whatsoever, whither our custom of resting on the 7th day have not come. Right? In other words, they like to say that we borrow from this or they borrow from that. No, the point is we didn't follow them. They followed us. Right? So even when you talking that Gregorian calendar, this, that, and the third, they were following the Hebrews, you know what I'm saying? 6 days, you know what I'm saying, a day of rest, so on and so forth. That's how they got the cycle, right? And historically, we know the Roman day of Saturn is the same thing as modern day Saturday, right? Don't want to argue that. That's just nonsensical. It is what it is. All right. So understand, Christ kept it, right? Though the name wasn't Saturday, it was still the same 7th day, right? Now we know the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. All right. So we can check the references. You know what I'm saying? Strategematicum. I always struggle with that word. By Julius Frontanius on page 98. All right. Let's get it. It says the defied Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn. Right. We know that Saturn and Saturday is the same 7th day. All right. A day on which it is simple for them to do any business. So defeated them. What day would that be? That would be the Sabbath. So though they called it Saturn, it was still the 7th day of our Sabbath day. Right. Let me read it again. The defied Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn. Right. They were still calling it Saturn, but it was still our 7th day. You know what I mean? Sabbath. Right. Let's get Roman Historian. Why can't I talk? Roman History by Dio Cassis, page 125 and page 127. It says, but the temple itself, which the other party had occupied, he captured only with difficulty, but it was on a high ground and was fortified by a wall of its own. And if they had continued defending it all days alike, he could not have gotten possession of it. As it was, they made an exception of what are called the days of Saturn, and by doing no work at all on those days, afforded the Romans an opportunity in this interval to batter down the wall. Thus, the defenders were captured on the day of Saturn without making an defense. Salakia. Without making any defense. That's what that was supposed to say. All right. So the point being, you know what I'm saying? We know that the temple was taken over in 70 AD, but this is giving you, you know what I'm saying, the historical account of how it was taken down. The day that they called the day of Saturn was the Sabbath day, and they only took it because we didn't work on the Sabbath day, right? We didn't have any defense. And that's not the first time that happened. We got it in 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 31, where folks were being taken advantage of because they didn't, you know what I'm saying, work or fight on the Sabbath day, right? It is what it is. 1 Maccabees chapter 2, looking at verses 31 through 32, it says, "Now when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were going down into the secret places in the wilderness." Verse 32, "They pursued after them a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day." Right? They, you know what I'm saying, the stratagem, if they were to go up against Israel, all right, was to wait until the Sabbath day to attack them. Why? Because, you know what I'm saying, they're not going to break the Sabbath. All right, verse 36, it says, "Howbeit they answered them not, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the places where they lay hid, but said, Let us die all in our innocency. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle to the number of 1,000 people." Right? It is what it is. What's the next question? Right? So the next question would have to be, you know what I'm saying? Did the 7-day weekly Sabbath change? Right? Since, you know what I'm saying, we had the Gregorian calendar. So we have to look at the history of the Gregorian calendar and see what actually happened. In 1582, Pope Gregory, the 13th, instituted his calendar by jumping ahead 11 days numerically. Right? He jumped ahead 11 days numerically. The 7-day weekly cycle was not affected. Right? And that's why we have the calendar up there so you can actually see how it happened. Right? The order of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday was not affected. He only changed the numbers of the days. Right? We get that, right? Right? We do know what day it was because we have the historical records, of course. All right. Who put the Gregorian calendar together? Aloysius Lilius, right? I.e., we keep the same 7-day cycle as Christ did in the Bible. They like to say, oh, the Gregorian calendar is off and this, that, and the third. Understand it. The days of the week are numbered according to their order. Sunday, day 1, Monday, day 2, Tuesday, day 3, Wednesday, day 4, Thursday, 5, Friday, 6, and Saturday is 7, right? I know y'all hate the word Saturday because y'all make too much, you know what I'm saying? Make too much of it. It is what it is. It's still the seventh day. All right. It says, it is to be noted that in the Christian period, the order in the days in the week has never been interrupted. Thus, when Gregory the 13th reformed the calendar in 1582, Thursday the 4th, October was followed by Friday, all right, October the 15th. He just changed the numbers, but the same days was still, you know what I'm saying? It was what it was. Saturday versus lunar Sabbath. The concept of the lunar Sabbath, all right, where the Sabbath is based on the lunar cycle rather than a continuous 7-day week, is a topic of debate among scholars and religious communities. Those who adhere to the traditional 7-day week argue that the lunar Sabbath interpretation introduces several discrepancies and challenges when compared to the scriptures. Here are some key points of contention. Right? Scriptural discrepancies, right? The continuous weekly cycle. All right. Scriptural argument. The Bible presents the Sabbath as a continuous 7-day cycle that began at creation. Genesis 1-2 describes a 6-day creation followed by a day of rest, right? Establishing a perpetual weekly cycle. The lunar Sabbath challenge. The lunar Sabbath introduces breaks in the weekly Sabbath with the new moon day and potentially transitional days, disrupting the continuity of the 7-day cycle. Right? And then we have lack of explicit lunar Sabbath references in the Bible, right? Scriptural argument. There are no explicit references in the Bible that directly link the Sabbath observance to the lunar cycle. The Sabbath is consistently described as occurring every seventh day without reference to lunar phases. All right, lunar Sabbath challenge. Proponents of the lunar Sabbath must infer the connection from scriptures that mention the new moon, but these do not directly tie to the Sabbath to the lunar calendar. They don't tie the Sabbath to the lunar calendar. Select it, right? Then we have the Sabbath on specific days of the month. The scriptural argument would be traditional Sabbath observance aligns with a continuous 7-day cycle, meaning the Sabbath can fall on any day of the month depending on when the cycle started, right? So the lunar challenge is this. The lunar Sabbath always falls on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, right? So we made easy work of that when we found that the Sabbath was the 3rd day after the month started, right? And not the 8th or the 15th or the 22nd or the 29th. We made easy work of that. When David went to go eat the showbread, it is what it is. So let's get to some practical discrepancies. All right. And we're almost done. I feel my mouth getting dry. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Right. But that's what you're supposed to do. It is what it is. Alignment with agricultural and pilgrimage feasts. Right. The scriptural argument. Biblical feasts such as Passover, unleavened bread, and Sukkot has specific days on the Hebrew calendar. All right. For example, Passover on the 14th of Nisan. Things of that nature. All right. Aligning the weekly Sabbath, all right, for the lunar Sabbath. Aligning the weekly Sabbath with the lunar calendar can create logistical challenges, as these feasts may not always align with the lunar Sabbaths, potentially leading to conflicts or additional observances, right? It just throws it off numerically. The math don't work. Historical practices. Right? Historical Jewish practice, as documented in various historical texts, has consistently followed a continuous 7-day week. It's not a change, right? And then if you say it is, then you have to say something was wrong in Christ's day because he kept the same 7-day week cycle. Lunar Sabbath challenge. There is a limited historical evidence to suggest that the ancient Israelites or early Jews observed the Sabbath based on a lunar cycle. You don't find it, right? You can try to reach, or you can go into some books that, well, it is what it is. Specific scriptural passages. Exodus chapter 16, verse 23 through 30. All right, talks about manna and the Sabbath, so on and so forth, right? This passage describes the gathering of manna, which occurred for 6 days with a double portion on the 6th day, right? On the 6th day, right? So they didn't have to gather it on the Sabbath, followed by rest on the 7th day. There is no mention of new moon days or transitional days, right? That's a problem. The continuous cycle of manna gathering and rest does not fit well with the interpretation of the lunar-based cycle. Just doesn't, right? Leviticus, talking about the Day of Atonement in Leviticus 23 and 32, right? The Day of Atonement is described as a Sabbath of solemn rest on the 10th day of the 7th month, regardless of the lunar phase. This specific date does not align with the 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th days prescribed by the so-called lunar Sabbath calendar. Problems. So let's get to the conclusion. We're going to get up out of here. Told you I didn't come to stay. I just came to make this plain so we can move on, right? And then we can get, and for the people that are just coming along and learning, you know what I'm saying, we need to chop down the confusion, because folks come in with that confusing lunar doctrine and try to tell you that you're worshiping on the wrong day. There was no such thing. We know that Monday is Moon's Day. You know what I'm saying? Tuesday is Tyr's Day. Wednesday is Woden's Day. Thursday is Thor's Day. Friday is Frigga's Day. Saturday is Saturn's Day. We get that. And Sunday is the Sun's Day. We already know the names is pagan, but it does not change the days, the count of the days. The first day of the week through the 7th day, as established by the Most High in the scriptures. It is what it is, right? The concept of the lunar Sabbath presents several scriptural and practical discrepancies when compared to traditional interpretations of the Bible. The continuous 7-day weekly cycle, the lack of explicit scriptural references to a lunar-based Sabbath, and the historical practice of Sabbath observance all challenges the validity of the lunar Sabbath interpretation. Those who observe the traditional Sabbath argue that the weekly cycle established at creation has remained unbroken, whereas the lunar Sabbath introduces complexities not clearly supported by the scriptures, or if at all, right? And then too, you have to get into which Hebrew words mean Shabbat and which one is saying Shabbat one to understand, the context of what you're reading. It is what it is. That being the case, Brother Chick, come in and give us some wisdom. Good to see you, fam.
Good to see you, bro. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me, bro?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Real quick, man, you covered everything, but I just wanted to help add some tools just on that, what I feel is off about doing anything based on, the lunar calendar. A lot of times I think where people get off of it is they see things in the Bible like new moon, and like we talked about before, they don't go into the words that were there. And one thing that helped me when I came into the truth, I started wanting to get into the Sabbath and the holy days, was understanding what was actually there. So when you look at Genesis 37:9, and he's talking about the sun and the moon, the word that's there is H3390, which is Urea. That's when he's talking about that moon that we see out there. It's specific. He's talking about the sun, moon, and stars. But when you see new moon, like you talked about in 1 Samuel, the word there, which is H2320, is Hodesh, which means a month, monthly. It's different words. And when we don't get into that and really break down and see what he is actually using there, because we have to remember the Most High is not, he's not the author of confusion. We have to really look at those words so we know what he's talking about, because I think that's where a lot of this lunar calendar thing comes from. And I know people celebrate holy days or different days and all that, but one thing where we go off is I don't know where the lunar calendar come from. It doesn't make sense to me, but I think it's just more important for us to continue to look at these words. That's what stood out to me. As soon as I seen the topic, I was like, let me look up those words again, because those helped me a lot in my research and getting to where I am and trying to stick to the holy days and trying to stick to the Sabbath correctly. And like you said, it should be simple. 1 through 7, we can get rid of all those names. 1 through 7, first day of the week, look at the calendar, 7th day of the week, whatever you want to call that day. You want to call it Saturday, you want to call it Shabbat, whatever you want to call it, that's the 7th day. That's what, if the Most High comes back, when Christ comes back, if he tells us he was wrong, he shouldn't be telling us we were wrong based on stuff we made up out of nowhere. I want to be wrong because somebody showed me a calendar that was completely wrong and we didn't have any proof to disprove it. That's all I had. I hope that helps. I just wanted to encourage people to continue to look into those words and what was actually there. Thanks, bro.
No, appreciate that, bro. Appreciate that. And I have to mute my mic and turn my speakers on so that the house can hear you. But yeah, and good word too. Good word. And thanks for bringing out the origin of those words. A lot of people, don't really understand, that studying your Bible is not the same as just reading it, right? You have to study to show yourself approved. And then when these doctrines come in, of things like the lunar calendar, so on and so forth, they're made to make you insecure and question, should I be doing this thing? Listen, it's important to bring this message, and it's not for contention's sake. I don't like being contentious with my brothers. I don't mind being contentious with Pastor Porkchop. I'm going at his neck. But my brothers, I try to let you do you, and it is what it is. You got to live according to your convictions. But when it comes to us keeping the Sabbath day and us in this ministry teaching the Sabbath, we want to be able to move forward and let folks know, that whole lunar thing is man-made doctrine. That's confusion, and it was set to confuse you, right? And then and at the same time, you have to be able to prove that thing biblically, all right? And so we had to bring out the biblical references, to show how that don't work. We had to bring out the historical references to show that it don't work, and historical documentations to show you that the weekly 1 through 7 has not changed, right? That whole transitional week throws a monkey in there, and it's not supported by scriptures. it is what it is. So yes, we keep the weekly Sabbath. We encourage you to keep the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath as well. But at the same time, I know no matter what was shown or what was spoken in this script, in this Bible study, there's still going to be some people that's going to hold tight to that doctrine. You do you, right? But this is just to answer the questions to those, you know what I mean, who may have some doubt about honoring the Sabbath day. We you know what I'm saying, we understand that the Sabbath is a sign between the Most High and his chosen people, and he gave us a command to keep it throughout our generations. It's important to the Most High that you keep it, so it's important that you know when it is, right? That being the case, I'm not going to overtalk it. I enjoyed kicking it with y'all, you know what I'm saying, and I'm sorry that we was a week late, and I apologize for last week Bible study. Me and the wife was on vacation for our anniversary, so we wasn't in town. I had to let a video fly. And had I known it was that choppy one, I would have picked something else, but it is what it is. All right, so enjoyed you. Shabbat Shalom, Brother Chick, you know what I'm saying? Brother Emmanuel, Sister Alice Bronson, Sister Yasatar De La Paz, Sister Yakahana, you know what I'm saying? Brother Brian Wood, Shabbat Shalom. And anybody else that might be out there, if you watch the video later, Shabbat Shalom to you. We just ask that you enjoy the rest of your Shabbat, all right? Shabbat Shalom, everybody.